For Victims and Villains, my name is Josh, and today we are heading into the land of fairy tales and fantasy to talk about The Ugly Stepsister. The Ugly Stepsister is the Cinderella story that we all know and love, but it's told from the vantage point of one of the stepsisters this time around. And oh yeah, it is a body horror film. Let's get into it. So overall, I have had a love-hate relationship with these public domain slasher and or like childhood favorites kind of getting their horror remakes or redos or makeovers, whatever you want to call it. I also find myself having a sweet spot for the Pooniverse universe movie of films. I loved the first two Blood and Honey movies. Peter Pan's Neverland Nightmare still haunts my dreams. I think there are great things about this movie, and I have literally no negative things. I just came away from this feeling like I'm not the intended audience for this movie. Objectively, I can say this movie is inherently a great movie. For me, it was just an okay movie. I think the acting in this movie across the board is just absolutely dynamic. Lea Myren, who plays our protagonist in this movie, or antagonist, depending on how you walk away from this movie feeling like her character does. But anyways, she is the centerpiece, the piece of resistance, the tour de force of this movie, and it really is the glue that kind of makes it work as well as it does. There are definitely certain movies that you come across where it is a singular performance that literally ties together and becomes the fabric or the DNA of the entire movie, and that is what Myron's performance is here in this movie in The Ugly Stepsister. She is dynamic, hands down one of the best reasons that I can recommend this movie. She's just absolutely an incredibly fearless, bold, and vulnerable performance here. I think by now most of us are familiar with the Cinderella fairy tale. We know the story, we know the beats of it. And one of the things that I think this film does really well, especially with Myren, and really happens to elevate her performance, is just how subtle this approach to body horror really is. Like it's kind of like this like really slow burn, gross out transformation that I think works really well. By the time you kind of get to the final moments of the film, it's just kind of like a really grotesque celebration of the genre. I think it is the body horror elements that really do elevate this movie to really kind of bring you to the edge of your seat, because there are certain decisions where you know it's going to pay off later down the line, and it's kind of told very early on. But once you kind of get those payoffs, it feels so rewarding and so satisfying to culminate in or crescendo in this just really gross, gnarly celebration. Just it's one of my favorite genre moments of this year so far. For better or for worse, this movie stays very faithful to the Cinderella. It's just kind of told from a different perspective. And I had a love-hate relationship with that. I found this movie aggressively predictable, but also at the same time by offering to tell it from a different point of view and humanizing what is normally an antagonistic role in this vein, allowed for some really refreshing takes on this character and added some surprising depth to this movie. I'll talk about it in the mental health section of this video, but I really love the way that this movie approaches body dysmorphia and how it also serves as a social commentary for beauty standards. And again, I get that this is a period piece and beauty standards were way harsher back then than they are now, but there are some parts of the world where those beauty standards still exist. We just package them differently, and I love how this film kind of feels very timely for that as well. I feel like I constantly have love-hate relationships with elements of this movie. Take the pacing, for example. I thought the pacing when it came to the body horror stuff was very well earned and really took its time. And I really loved that aspect of it. When it got into more of the fantastical and or fairy tale elements of it, that's when I felt like the movie dragged the most. And again, that might just be personal preference for me, but I feel like this film just kind of, there are certain points where this story didn't necessarily need to drag, or certain scenes didn't need to go on as long as they do. And again, might be personal preference, but that's just my take at the end of the day. Another example would be actually how they utilize the Cinderella character for this movie, or the stand-in character, as she is referred to as Agnes in this movie. And again, it's not necessarily a bad thing, but there are certain moments within the film where they refer to her as Cinderella, and it just kind of feels like it's out of left field. Like maybe Cinderella is a fairy tale that exists within this fairy tale. I don't know. It's very offhanded, but also at the same time, like she felt like an afterthought in the grand scheme of things. Like she seemed to exist solely out of tradition and not necessarily out of obligation or necessity to the narrative. Which is a shame to say, because Thea Sofie Loch Naess does an incredible job in this movie, and her performance is one of the best things that this movie has to offer in terms of performances. But from a narrative perspective, her arc just kind of feels ultimately wasted for the most part. Maybe wasted is too harsh of a word, but more necessarily like a plot device. Like she just kind of seems like a plot device to kind of fuel the characters around her. And that in and of itself feels very Cinderella-ish. But again, this is not Cinderella's movie. So, yeah. With that one said, I am ready to run this through our Rorschach rating scale. I'm going to go ahead and give The Ugly Stepsister a 3 out of 5. Overall, I think there's both equally a lot to love and a lot to hate here as well. Lea Myren and Thea Sofie Loch Naess turn in terrific performances. There are some dynamic and truly gross out body horror here, but it's ultimately the fairy tale elements of this story that just didn't work for me. I think from a visual perspective, the set designs and the costume designs are absolutely exceptional. They did a fantastic job here. I think the story offers a lot in ways of commentating on body dysmorphia, creating a really refreshing aspect, but it's ultimately a lot of the fantastical elements that just did not work for me. Ugly Stepsister opens this Friday, April 18th in the United States from Shudder. It opens April 25th in the UK, also from Shudder, and it will be available to stream on Shudder later this year, and it'll be available on VOD beginning May 9th.